So I'm here with Senator Blumenthal, and I am so thrilled and honored to be able to speak with you on the eve of the Jewish New Year. And I know there are so many things we could be talking about, but what I'm hoping that we can do here is sort of make it more of a, two Jews and a schmooze, basically a conversation. I mean, obviously, there are many dimensions to our relationship. We've known each other for over 30 years as rabbi congregant and as senator constituent. So, and friends, of course, and family friends. So we'll go with all of that and try to put it all together. And I think, the first question I want to ask you is, well, first of all, welcome. I should say that. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
So we're heading into the new year. What is your frame of mind?
Well, talking to my rabbi, and very honored to be doing it in this setting, even though we're separated by hundreds of miles. I do feel very close to you. So I'm going to talk to you as a friend and kind of exclude the outside world, including people who may be listening here, but just talk from the heart.
I mean, I do have a few subscribers, but I have a feeling maybe a couple of people will be listening. But yeah, let's schmooze.
And I know people will be listening, but as I said in another occasion, in my world, there's no such thing as off the record. So I regard everything I say as, something the public is entitled to hear. Um, my frame of mind is hope, hopeful, but apprehensive. And in some ways, it's not all that different from any other year because we know at the beginning of the year that wonderful things may happen and bad things may happen. And we recite the prayer for good things, but we also acknowledge in the Rosh Hashanah service and then Yom Kippur that uh, bad things may happen as well. And in my world, uh, at this moment, it's sometimes very difficult to have hope. We're living through one of the darkest and potentially most depressing times in my professional career. A time when democracy is under threat, when Israel is at risk, when the cause of Ukraine, and I wear this pin proudly because I've been one of the leading advocates of support for Ukraine, also in jeopardy. World peace is fragile. And at home, we have the prospect of cuts in medical services and health insurance for people who need it, nutrition services, scientific research, vaccine accessibility. There's a long list in a time when we need that kind of support more than ever. But my family is well and growing,
Yes,
daughter. Uh,
and
and
Mazel Tov on that.
thank you, Rabbi. So the reason I'm hopeful is not only because of my family, but I couldn't come to work in the morning if I didn't have hope. And if I didn't believe the fight is worth doing and we can win the fight against these potential evils in the world.
So I can go in so many different directions, and I plan to from that one answer. But I just want to pick up on dealing with the frustrations. Let's start with that. How do you go to work in the morning? I mean, how do you go into the Senate and sit down and and pick up your phone and find out that the president has just turned off the funding for the Revolution Wind project? I live on the shoreline of Connecticut, so that could very well have. It was 80% done. It was gonna use wind power to power up 350,000 homes, probably including my own, and it's just wiped off the ledger. It's how do you deal with that kind of frustration? I mean, the two questions: what can we do about that? But also the general question of, being in a capital that isn't functioning right now
It hasn't
at
been functioning
best.
properly for a while. And every day I come to work hoping to reach across the aisle, work with Republicans, try to enlist people who disagree with me on other topics where we have common ground, whether it's Lindsey Graham and the Russia sanctions bill that would try to choke the revenue coming from India, Brazil, and most of all China for Putin's war machine. Try to make the internet safer, working with Marsha Blackburn on the kids' online safety bill to stop the algorithmically driven toxic content, bullying, eating disorders at children, working with Josh Hawley on AI reforms to try to contain the possibility that generative artificial intelligence will create deep fakes and impersonations and possibly artificial intelligence that's smarter than the people who created and out of control. On these issues, I try to create common cause. So how do I come to work in the morning with hope? Because I know that we can get stuff done if we work in the right way. And I have to put it in perspective. I am really privileged to have this job. Every day I come to the United States Senate, grateful, so deeply grateful that I have this opportunity to make a difference. And so, one foot in front of the other, working every day to help individual people. And part of the joy of this job is, in fact, helping individual constituents with as mundane a problem as getting a passport. They're on their way to Israel for the bar mitzvah, and they discover their 13-year-old doesn't have a passport, and they're leaving in 48 hours, and they can't get an appointment it may seem like a mundane, small thing, but it makes a difference. Social Security check, VA healthcare and benefits, health insurance. For 20 years, I was Attorney General, and I was often asked, what's your most important case? And I would say every time a constituent calls me, that's my most important case. And I would get letters from people, and I still do, you know, you saved my mom's life because she couldn't get health insurance for brain surgery that she needed. You can't pay me enough for that kind of letter. And you've received the same kind of letters in what
But
you
I've
do.
also forwarded some of them to your office, some of the requests, and
Yeah.
I've seen that work be done. And I mean, I have to say, you've been so diligent and so true to your ideals. Yeah, I just want to sorry, let's back up to the requests that come into your office because I have a feeling a few of them are coming from asylum seekers, refugees, immigrants, people who have an accent, who are under siege right now. How are you helping them? Can you give any examples recently, or what can we as citizens of your state, you know, do to help those who are being afflicted right now?
Well, let me try to be as short-winded as I can be with, verbosity is an occupational hazard for a senator.
For both of us.
uh, my dad had an accent. My dad came to this country from Germany in 1935. He was 18 years old. He came here to escape persecution, the Holocaust. And he had not much more than a shirt on his back. He spoke no English and he knew virtually no one. And this country gave him a chance to succeed. When I encounter people with an accent, when I meet immigrants, I see my dad. And I think about the great privilege I have to be an American. But I also think of him, how it was for him, a Jewish 18-year-old, and I've seen pictures of him, a skinny little kid coming here alone, having to earn a living. He never got any education, not even high school. He was self-educated, better educated than I am, having gone to Harvard College and Yale Law School. And so when I see an immigrant coming to this country seeking hope and opportunity and freedom, it has enormous personal meaning to me. When I encounter an immigrant who is going to be deported because the asylum process has taken too long, I try to get that immigrant a reprieve through the legal system. We go to bat for immigrants who have a legitimate case. They're not criminals. They've done nothing wrong. And by the way, some of them are here for 20 or 30 years. They have kids here. They have wives who are citizens. We have a broken immigration system, and I've tried to reform it. In 2013, we actually did a bill. I helped to lead an immigration reform bill. It was comprehensive, provided a path to citizenship for those 11 million plus people, as well as border security. And it passed the Senate, bipartisan majority. The House never gave it a vote. So when I see an immigrant who is undocumented and has a legitimate case to be here, I also think of reform for the immigration system. And we need border security, no question about it. We need a system that works for legal immigration. But I try to help people, and I'll just finish with this one example. Young man, 5 children, came here from Afghanistan on a special immigration visa, SIV as it's called. They are provided to groups of individuals who are regarded as meriting the opportunity to come here for a period of time when they can establish residence and perhaps seek a permanent path to citizenship. The reason he had an SIV was because he was an interpreter and translator for our troops in Afghanistan. He put his life on the line. When the Taliban took over, there was a target on his back and his family. He came to this country legally, and he was seized. He was arrested as he went to a government office to fill out the papers for his green card. He was employed. He was paying Social Security tax. He was not in any way hiding. He was trying to do everything right. And he was seized, and I went to visit him in the prison where he was confined in Plymouth. He's been there since he was seized more than a month ago. His 5 children talk to him every day, and they cry. There is no reason, none, that he should be in prison. And so I've tried to aid him through a lawyer and others who are advocating for him. And we have a lot of Afghan allies, at-risk Afghan allies. The reason they're at risk is because they helped us. One of my sons, whom you know, Matthew, served in Afghanistan as a United States Marine officer. He helped his translator, his interpreter, come to this country. He's a lawyer. It took him 2 years. And there are all these allies and their families who deserve to come here. Same is true of Ukrainian citizens who fled their country. They were told to flee. Women and children were advised they could go. The men have stayed. I try to reach out and advocate for people who have a legitimate and lawful claim and who would be deported unlawfully, but in my view, also immorally.
Do you find that the government authorities are listening to you? Do they take your calls?
It is a mixed bag. By and large, the people I talk to are the people in our Immigration and Naturalization Service or in the other agencies that have responsibility who have been there for, frankly, quite a few years. And they're as troubled as I am. about some of the new ICE policies and the practices, agents in mass, seizing people in government offices, in churches, in courthouses, and schools, throwing them into unmarked cars, confining them in prisons, and not criminals. The criminals should be deported. Somebody who is a murderer or rapist, yes, the American people want them deported. But people who are here doing all the right things, like Zia was, the Afghan ally I mentioned, Americans believe in fairness. And so people who work in these agencies will take my calls, but often they are powerless because of policies and practices set by the leadership of their agencies.
So I want to switch gears a little bit. Um, I just personally, do you feel safe? We've been dealing with horrible violence, terrible, inexcusable violence, and it spans the political spectrum. It's beyond politics at this point, although of course very political. You were there in that building on January 6th. I'm sure there are some points where you feel, am I really safe here? But I want to expand it a little bit and ask if you're going to feel safe in our synagogue on the high holidays.
I will. We have security,
We do.
and
And people should feel safe, or at least they should attend synagogue and overcome fear because it's so important. I don't want to give it, any hint that people shouldn't attend because that's just giving in. But I personally, do you feel as a Jew and as a representative of our country, do you feel safe?
I do. I will feel safe attending services these holidays, but I've also advocated for increased funding for security. The Nonprofit Security Grant Program,
Yeah,
you may be familiar with it, provides subsidies to synagogues, but also churches and mosques and community centers that may be at risk and may not have the resources to protect themselves. And I've advocated increasing the amounts, and I've led the effort of government funding, federal resources made available. So the issue of safety is to be taken very, very seriously. And, you know, we can talk about the instances of violence, deadly violence that have occurred in synagogues and churches and mosques around the country. It's a vile, vicious cancer that is metastasizing, violence in our society. But I will feel safe because I'm surrounded by my family and friends. And, you know, um, the synagogue is always a place I've felt welcome and safe. And it has a very special feel that is the antithesis of threat. But I will say that I am more aware of the dangers as a public official.
I guess we have to be.
I have not changed my routine at all. This last weekend, I was at a public fair. I spoke on the stage. I was at a parade in Norwalk. I was at a Ukrainian festival. I went to all kinds of public events, as many as I could fit in my schedule. This weekend, the same. I will be at this is a big time of year for country fairs, and I have been to uh, many of them around the state. And I love going because I encounter people. Sometimes people disagree with me. They'll come up to me and they'll argue with me, which is great. That's why I'm there, to listen to
Yeah,
people. I have never really felt threatened. I look now at people who may seem hostile, but as you know, people can seem hostile and then they can turn out to be the friendliest person in the world. So by and large, I feel safe in whatever the context.
that's wonderful. And of course, I pray for you. I pray for all of us. And you are always at the synagogue, and on the holidays, and I should tell everybody that you do a mean Aliyah blessing too. People should know that.
It helped from
Um,
Cynthia.
and being Jewish has been, yes, well, Cynthia probably a little louder, but
Fortunately
being
for the conversation, she has a much better voice.
now being Jewish has always been so important to you. You've taken it so seriously, um, and that and people do feel unsafe. And I'm thinking in particular of our kids right now, students, and there are so many things going on. We can't get into all of it today, but the ADL yesterday came up with a scary statistic that 78% of Jewish students on campus would prefer to hide their religious identity. Now that's worldwide, but I'd say it's probably pretty high in America alone, and of course many Americans are abroad. And it has to do with security and safety and anti-Semitism. It also has to do with their ambivalence, many of them, toward Israel right now. How would you address, uh, an American Jewish college student in this fraught time?
What I would say is, I understand and I sympathize with your apprehension, and universities have to do better in protecting students from harassment and the threat of violence, even if the threat isn't materialized from the possibility of violence, which intimidates and inhibits learning and the kinds of relationships that are so important. So I think universities have a responsibility. We all have a responsibility to condemn anti-Semitism as well as other kinds of bias, whether it is Islamophobia or racism. We are a people that thrives on inclusion and tolerance. It's in our DNA, part of who we are. And you're right that the Jewish faith has such deep meaning for me from from birth, uh, and for my family. So I would say to students, be strong. We need to help you, and your universities have a responsibility. And I hope that you will aid us. I do public events where I heighten the dangers of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, and I use those ADL statistics. And as a matter of fact, I do these press events with the ADL as well as Federation and other organizations that have an interest to denounce and expose anti-Semitism wherever it occurs on campuses, in our communities, the flyers that are sometimes distributed, the swastikas that are written. I I focus attention on them. We can't hide from them. We need to confront them. That's always been my attitude toward anti-Semitism. And, uh, you know, we need to be very real.
Yeah.
And from my earliest days of consciousness, that anti-Semitism exists in a lot of different forms. I'll never forget I don't think I've told you this story, Rabbi, but my first Sunday in the United States Marine Corps at Parris Island in boot camp, they lined us up on two sides. And the drill instructor said, okay, we have to give you time for religious observance. Now, I want my Catholics on this side, and I want my Protestants on that side. And I was standing there in the middle. And you know about boot camp that expletives are in long supply. So the drill instructor said, what are you, some whatever Buddhist? Or, making fun of me, knowing that I was not a Buddhist, and I said, no, sir, I'm Jewish. And he said, well, we don't have services for Jews. He said, you can take your pick, Catholic or Protestant. And of course, that was just one sign or symbol. And thereafter, when I did something that was wrong. And every recruit, everybody in basic training does something that's wrong. And if you don't do something that's wrong, the drill instructor will make it up because that's the idea that they try to humiliate, break down people. There was often a religious reference.
Wow, that's a great story.
So this phenomenon is pervasive, but it's also, remember, there were anti-Catholic movements in the country. There still are people who are anti-Catholic. There are people who despise Muslims for all the wrong reasons. Um, and I often think of that. You've probably seen South Pacific, uh,
Yeah.
where the Asian girl who's courted by an American serviceman has a song, "You Have to Be Carefully Taught." And the idea of the song, I'm not going to sing it for you. Don't worry.
You do
Uh,
have a good voice.
but the thrust of the song is, you're not born with prejudice. It's carefully taught. And we need to go to universities, go to the people. People can learn. They can, that drill instructor, by the way, here's the sequel to the story. At the end of basic training, uh, we finished up there. There's a graduation. He came up to me and he said, you know, I never thought a Jew could do that well in, and he said, but I should have known. He said, you're the guys who beat all the Arabs in the Six-Day War. He said, you guys are the best fighters in the world. And, I never really thought of it that way, but the Israeli military is one of the most, if not the most competent, frankly, today, person for person, one of the most competent, effective military forces in the world, the Israeli intelligence system, and they work very closely with the United States. It's one of the ways that I've championed aid, military aid for Israel, because it benefits the United States. It's in our national security. So he was saying to me, in effect, as a United States Marine Corps sergeant, that he saw that as a facet of the Jewish faith.
Wow. So, I want to that college student or the 78%, that number is a huge, it's a five alarm, not if not a fire, in that it speaks to several things at once that can all be true. One is that there really is anti-Semitism and that they are really afraid, and that we need to address that and attack that. And I appreciate that universities are doing more to address it now. It needs to be done. And there's a lot of anti-Semitism that's based on what's happening in Israel and Gaza. There are also ambivalent feelings that so many, and I see it in my own students and my kids, there's so many Jewish students are having issues with some of Israel's actions. And of course, they hear it from everywhere around them. And they have a right to question, as we do, some of Israel's decisions. They're in Gaza right now, in Gaza City. And so that becomes a source of just not wanting to deal with the argument, not wanting to declare their pride in Israel, which we would hope they would have publicly. I would hope that they could be proud of being Jewish and still feel comfortable questioning Israel, and proud of being Jewish because of Jewish values that are so deeply ingrained in us and we want to ingrain in them: loving education, loving the stranger, kindness, tolerance, as you said. And then there's the other element to all of this, that they feel uncomfortable because what we're seeing happen right now is an attack on the university system and on our most prestigious universities and on liberal education and values in the name of protecting Jews from anti-Semitism. That's of course being perpetrated, by the president and by the government right now, as which some people, including myself, tend to believe is part of a grand strategy to discredit political and philosophical opponents in advance of future elections and just to amass power, to discredit universities and discredit the intellect. And education is so important for Jews. All of these things need to be part of the conversation. But most of all, when I'm talking to our kids, I just want to hug them. I just want to tell them they're not alone. Just tell them we may not agree on everything. I hope they'll love Israel, that they'll come to love Israel just as I love America and don't always agree with what its government is doing. And it begins with that hug. And I just hope, and it's going to be a message to every rabbi in the country next week, just hug our kids. Start with that. Anyway, that's my sermon for the day.
Well, that is very beautifully said. And I am going to unashamedly repeat it, attributing it to my rabbi. Uh, but I think it is that hug that is so tremendously important because, you know, eh, it's a time of being conflicted. And, you know, what else does it mean to be Jewish? To be
Right.
conflicted, to be thinking about both sides of the issue, to have people disagreeing with each other, to have different opinions. Uh, and the central point that you're making is, for me as a public official, you can support Israel without necessarily supporting every policy of its government. And I have been critical of Israel, but I have also been a strong supporter, unwaveringly, of military aid for Israel at a time when it needs it more than ever, as well as public support for Israel. I think there's a humanitarian crisis in Gaza that has to be addressed with food and medicine and water more reliably delivered. Hostages have to come home, which requires a ceasefire. I strongly support a ceasefire. The violence on the West Bank has to stop. And, there are other areas as well. And I made my views known to the prime minister very bluntly, privately, and I've said it publicly. I'm unashamed to state where I differ with the prime minister and his government.
So
But I
just a
also,
quick
just to
question,
finish,
just sorry.
Israel has a right and responsibility to defend itself. Hamas wants to kill the Jewish people and destroy the state of Israel. By the way, it also wants to destroy the United States. Hezbollah's mantra is death to Israel, death to the United States. They are proxies of Iran, which is the real toxic element here. Hezbollah, the Houthis, Hamas. I'm repeating what you and many of our listeners already know. And I am absolutely in awe of Israel's recent military actions against Hezbollah and Iran. And I am critical in part of this latest offensive in Gaza. That's kind of been I shouldn't say critical, but I've expressed strong reservations about the way they are pursuing or prosecuting this action because Israel's own military has expressed criticism of it. So I think there are complications here, and I more than forgive um, people who are even stronger as critics, because I think that criticizing the government is not the same thing as abandoning Israel.
So you mentioned you talked to the prime minister. Does Prime Minister Netanyahu care about what Democrats think? And I'll add to that progressive American Jews. Does he care? In your conversations, have you found that he does?
He expresses his interest, his concern about what Americans think, whether they're Democrats or Republicans.
Okay.
I'm worried
Yeah.
that he cares less than he did and than he should, because I'm very worried about frankly, the diminishing support. The polls show it,
Yeah,
and it is a very deeply concerning phenomenon. It does not in any way affect how I believe. I will support Israel today and tomorrow and forever. And I've said that in the wake of October 7th. And I've said it during 15 years as United States Senator and as 20 years as Attorney General and as a father and a citizen. And I just want to tell one other story, Rabbi.
sure.
Uh,
This is
I've,
the
I've been to
time.
Israel quite a few times since October 7th. And I've gone there generally with Republicans and non-Jews. Uh, in the wake of October 7th, literally a couple of weeks or so afterward, we met with the War Cabinet. And I helped to lead a 10 senator delegation. And we watched for the first time, they weren't yet public, the stomach turning, sickening videos that have since been shown. We were actually shown the kind of first run of them, so they were even more graphic.
Hmm.
And one of the ministers, one of the top-ranking ministers, said to me and to us afterward, he said, "You know, these people tried to run and hide. For our entire history, we have tried to run and hide. Israel was a place where supposedly we no longer had to run and hide. And that is why we must militarily prevail." And I'm not doing justice to the tone or even to the language necessarily, but in their gut, Israelis know they are in, what we refer to as a dangerous neighborhood. They know they are under threat literally every day, every hour of every day of every year. And they need the security of borders that can be relied upon. And that's why I understand, the feeling that they need to disable, if not destroy, Hamas as a military threat. And at the same time, they can disagree how best to get there, but also bring those hostages home. I've met with many of the hostage families numerous times. Some of them have lost their sons or daughters or their brothers and sisters. Some are from Connecticut, some are in Israel. I've formed a real bond with them, and bringing them home has been one of my top priorities from the very start. Um, and I
Yeah.
just, you know, feel so deeply about what Israel needs
Yeah,
to
listen.
achieve.
And I know what every word you say is authentic to you and so important for us to hear. And we're going to be praying. I think all of us need to pray for these hostages right now because I'm not sure how much support they're getting um, from those who have the greatest opportunity to present some resolution to their captivity. But both on the Hamas side and on the Israeli government side. So next year, October, the latest in Israel, November here, there are going to be elections. In Hungary too, it's a very important election. Um, I would say rank them on a scale of 1 to 10, which will be the most democratic or freest and fairest. But maybe I just ask you, do you think there will be free and fair elections in at least Israel and the US?
I think there will be. I have to believe there will be. I'm going to be fighting for free and fair elections. And I would just say I have been really heartened and encouraged by the energy that has developed. I'm speaking now as an elected official on the part of people who have a commitment to free and fair elections. And at the same time, there's no I'm not wearing rose-colored glasses here. I know there's a threat, and it's going to take vigilance and vigor and strong stomachs and hearts and minds to make sure that we have free and fair elections. But I believe at the end of the day, we need to work for a change in November of 2026, a change in the Congress, so that it will stand up to a president who is sadly and unfortunately creating a threat to democracy.
So I have a suggestion for, gerrymandering. I've been working on the map. I'm right here on the southern coast in Madison, and maybe we also pick up like Long Island into Connecticut and, create a couple more districts and could work. I don't know. I want to do like and I'm really, I don't mean to take this lightly. I'm feeling very concerned about democracy right now on so many fronts. Um, and it's good to know you are too. So maybe a little bit of a lightning round. I know I respect your time. Um,
That's a nice way of saying stop being so long-winded.
no, no, no. I'm the rabbi here. I'm the one who's all right. Let's say um, do you have a favorite high holidays moment, high holidays prayer, um, that fuels you, that gives you strength, that fuels your faith as a Jew? Or if not that, then something else that fuels your faith.
Um,
Tough lightning round question.
I
You don't get that from CNN.
that I that question. I really look forward to the high holidays. Holidays. It, there are moments when I look at my family, and that's kind of a favorite moment. And I can't say, it really varies from year to year. I have to tell you, there's no one moment that every year strikes me. The service is so varied and beautiful. And frankly, your sermons, if I may say, were one of my high points in every Rosh Hashanah service. And not just mine, but I will say for Cynthia and our family, not necessarily a time when we were praying, but I have found, the moments were varied from one year to another. And of course, after we had deaths in our family, certain moments evoking them and times with them were more meaningful.
Thank you. So this is a question I had to sort of change mid-course. This is the season of forgiveness, and I was imagining a scenario where the chaplain in the Senate asks everyone to stand and turn to their neighbor and ask forgiveness of the person next to them. But then I realized the person next to them is going to be from the same party. So that doesn't work. So let's say randomly someone across the aisle, is chosen and you can ask forgiveness of that person. Do you think that that could happen? That would ever happen in the Capitol building?
I have to be honest. I don't think it would ever happen in the way that you would want it to happen. I think it would be more theatrical and performative than anything else. Now, that wouldn't be true of everyone. I think some people would genuinely want to walk across the well of the Senate and talk to somebody on the other side where they really wanted forgiveness, not necessarily turning to the person next to them. I think it could happen.
Has
Uh,
anyone ever said, I'm sorry? Have you ever heard those words?
they have, yeah. When people said unkind things, they have sometimes apologized afterward. And I have apologized to others, frankly, for maybe being a little bit over the top. We tend to be passionate in certain causes, and it may lead us to say things that are hurtful. I think at the end of the day, I come to work every morning hoping to reach across the aisle, helping to work, hoping to work with Republicans, because it's the only way to get things done on child safety on the internet, on
Right.
AI oversight and regulation, on helping Ukraine, the Russia sanctions bill.
Do you
Uh,
think that I'm just a little quick tangent? Your buddy Lindsay, you travel together. You've appeared in Ukraine together. Will he take those final steps to make sure that there is some kind of justice for the people of Ukraine who have known so much sorrow?
he can't force the president to do the right thing. The president has been stalled and stonewalled. Putin has played with the president. He's mocked the United States. Putin, in essence, is stalling for time so he can kill more Ukrainians, slaughter women and children with the hundreds of drones and missiles that he sends there in a reign of terror every night. He thinks he can outlast us. I don't understand Donald Trump. I said he should listen to the first lady who has said to him, Donald, you said you had a nice conversation with Putin, and then he bombs Ukraine that night.
Yeah.
So Senator Graham can't force Trump to be rational and strategic here. I hope that public pressure will compel him to support our Russia sanctions bill and take action against India, China, and Brazil and stop them from buying Russian oil and gas, because that's the way to cripple Putin's economy, which is already faltering, and stop his war machine.
What
But
can make that pass?
I
Can
agree
that
with
be accomplished in this session? Can that sanctions bill get done?
absolutely, because it has 85 co-sponsors,
Hmm.
which is pretty unusual these days in the United States Senate. 85 co-sponsors, evenly divided, Republican, Democrat, which reflects the support in this body, but even more important, from the American people.
So just a couple more. That's it. How do we lower the temperature? And I'm as guilty as anyone of passion, which I think is different. Incitement is not hate speech. Otherwise, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Amos would have had a problem. And we need to distinguish between passion and concern expressed deeply and deeply held belief from hate speech. If for instance, if someone is acting in a way that is defined in the dictionary as fascist, you call it what it is. It doesn't mean you call someone a name. It means you have to call it out when it's happening. I don't know. I mean, how do we lower the temperature without giving up that passion?
I think by talking in the way that you just did, that we need to bring the country together and recognize that we have more in common than in conflict, by absolutely condemning violence, which is not new to the political scene. Obviously, I lived through the 60s with the killings of the Kennedys and Martin Luther King and the civil rights workers. Violence is unfortunately endemic to America, gun violence in particular, another topic. But I've been a longtime advocate and a leader in that area.
Mm-hmm.
And violence against Charlie Kirk was gun violence. Not to say the gun was responsible or that we're going to make a cause of it, but the point is to work for a more peaceful and civil society and discourse. But from a legal standpoint, what you just expressed is actually the law, that speech is protected, even when it can be offensive, even when people may find it hateful. The line is whether it incites violence. The crying fire in a crowded movie house, which incites potential physical harm, the fighting words, as they're termed in the law. And it's a difficult line to draw, but as Charlie Kirk himself said, you may be offended by certain language, but it's protected. And I think that is a very dangerous trend, the contrary trend in what some of our leaders have said, which is that they are going to go after certain kinds of speech, apparently, certain groups, that they're sponsoring a crackdown on one political element or another, and nonprofit groups. That
It,
is
yeah,
language acts of a political witch hunt or
which,
persecution.
sounds like me to be just the same thing that they're trying to do with universities, using anti-Semitism as the means to go in and achieve a political aim. They're trying to do that now with this issue of violence and hate speech, and it's very scary because we've seen it done elsewhere in the world. People talk about the Reichstag fire and other things like that that have come to create an environment of authoritarianism, and of course also bringing troops into Washington, LA, and potentially other cities. So these are tough times, and I want to end with a on a positive note. No, I'd like to. What are you looking forward to aside from this new granddaughter, who is amazing? What are you looking forward to over the coming year?
What we pray for in synagogue, peace, good health, happiness for our family. There's an old saying, as you know, you're never uh, more happy than your least happy child. And that is what I devoutly wish for every year. Um, and peace in the world, as many places as there are conflict now. And, people are going hungry. People are at risk of disease that could spread to this country because they aren't getting vaccines to prevent tuberculosis, diseases that we've conquered in our country and are
You're
spreading
not
elsewhere.
making me feel any better now.
Well, here's I think we are uh, you know, working as hard as we can. The hope is that others are as well, and that all of our work will produce results. Because at the end of the day, we will be measured by not just good intentions and faith, by also results. God's work is truly our own. And I am hopeful that good people can sustain each other and encourage each other and provide more happiness. I don't want to minimize the problem. I don't want to sound Pollyannish or, as I mentioned earlier, rose-colored glasses. I see the world for what it is, but I know we can make it better. And I get satisfaction from working at making it better, you know, not always successfully, but with the guidance and wisdom of people like yourself.
Oh, thank you. And I take your vision and your guidance and your wisdom and your work, your diligence as an inspiration. And I'm realistically concerned, more than I ever have been, about the world. As an emeritus, I don't have the burden of having to communicate all things to all people from the pulpit. I can do it in writing and in forums like this right now, which lend me a little bit more freedom to express that concern. But I do hope that people can find light, can find optimism, to find hope, and I do find hope in one thing. I believe that I believe in the power of the single individual to make a profound change. And a single event, now sometimes that can be negative, but in the case of elections, it can be extremely positive. And over the coming year, we have that opportunity in this country and Israel and around the world to make that kind of change, to enhance democracy, to enhance freedom, to enhance kindness, and what I call, menschlichkeit throughout the world. Any last words?
Yes. Every problem is an opportunity. We should know the story of us is the story of survival. And when people say, oh, this is the worst it's ever been, I kind of think back to the Holocaust, to so many parts of our history where, you know, the temple was destroyed and we wandered. And we had to endure, the persecutions of Europe in the Middle Ages. So survival is it's what we do, and survival with hope and joy, l'chaim. Uh,
L'chaim.
so we should take the blessings that we have and be joyous about them. But I will also say, in terms of the hope, there are great people among us. I think back to people who had to endure. I got to know John McCain very well. There's a man who was in solitary confinement, broken limbs, beaten for years as a prisoner of war. I traveled with him to Israel. He was such a great believer in Israel. There's nobody I ever saw who took more joy in walking through the Old City or going to the Wailing Wall. And the culture and heritage, he used to joke with me and Joe Lieberman that, maybe he got put in the wrong cradle. Uh, I think of my dad,
Or
who,
maybe Joe did.
anyway, that's the idea. There are great people who sustain us through dark periods and challenging times.
So let's find some hope in all of that. And I want to wish you and all, my congregants and others out there whom I haven't seen as much in the last several months, and wish everybody throughout the world a year of sweetness, good health, and peace. And thank you so much for joining me this evening or whenever you are all listening to this. And let's do it again.
Absolutely. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks for honoring me and Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.